29 years in the state of Minnesota. I was a former candidate for the Minnesota Supreme Court. I was the lead plaintiff in the case of Republican Party of Minnesota versus White, which dealt with judicial elections that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. I am currently a candidate for the Minnesota Supreme Court for the elections to be held in 2010, and I am currently suing the state of Minnesota for additional judicial election rules that were created by the Minnesota Supreme Court after we won in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. They just create more rules, and we just have to churn out more litigation. I was asked today to talk about the judicial system, and I would start by saying the judicial system is out of control. And the problems are judicial incompetence, judicial abuse, and maybe judicial corruption. I want to talk briefly about judicial incompetence. Almost all the judges in Minnesota, it's well over 90%, are appointed by the governor. And frankly, the governor appoints his friends. And frankly, many of those friends are not intellectual giants. And so we have a lot of mediocre judges. What that means is that we have an instance, for instance, we have the Minnesota Supreme Court, where not one judge on the Minnesota Supreme Court has been a prior trial court judge, district court judge, prior to their appointment. They have no experience on the trial courts. Yet all the cases they're getting before them, they're reviewing trial court decisions. So it just doesn't make any sense, the system we've got. 90% of the caseload in front of district court judges are criminal law and family law cases, and yet many of the governor's friends are corporate lawyers who've never handled a criminal or divorce case in their lives. And that incompetence is then reflected in their decisions. Judicial abuse is the second problem. It takes many forms. Several years ago, the legislature created sentencing guidelines. I've practiced criminal law for 29 years, and I'm going to tell you that the sentencing guidelines are commonly ignored in our courts. Another problem is bail guidelines. Just a few years ago, several years ago, the legislature created a rule that said that repeat DWI offenders had to either be given $10,000 bail or be put on an alcohol censor. Yet you can go into courthouses throughout the state and find that that rule is ignored. So what happens is that...
excuse me, did you say the legislature created a rule? Or are you saying it was a law?
The legislature created a law.
Okay,
excuse me, a law. And then, let me give you an example of what happens. The best example is out in Wilmer. The prosecutors in Wilmer looked at the court rules and they said, well, look, we've got a right under the court rules to strike a judge from hearing the case. It's in the rules. Supposedly everybody should be able to do it. So they had a certain judge there who wouldn't follow the guidelines for either bail or an alcohol censor on repeat DWI offenders. So they would routinely strike that judge. You know what happened? There was immediately an action, and the Minnesota Supreme Court was threatening the county attorney's office that with sanctions, that if they continued to persist in filing to strike that judge, that they were going to go after the attorney's license. Now, what we have is the judiciary telling the executive branch, because the county attorney is part of the executive branch, how they should handle their office. And this is a threat to the people of Minnesota, because if we don't have effective county attorneys, we're going to have problems.
I'm sorry, Mr. Worswell. Let me just get clarification that. So the county attorneys said that the judge was not issuing accordance to guidelines and they were striking him from the list, and then the Supreme Court came back and basically said you can't do that or it will come against his license?
They'll come against the attorney's license, the prosecutor's license. That's correct. Okay. And again, the court rules say you can strike a judge without giving a reason. The prosecutor does not have to give any reason to strike a judge, just as the defense have a right in a criminal case to strike a judge without stating a reason. But again, because it was obvious that there was a pattern, they went after the county attorney. And again, I think this is an abuse of judicial power. Judges have the power to arrest people and throw them in jail. And I still remember to this day in Hennepin County watching a judge who ordered the bailiff to go out